Everyone, welcome to week 19 of 20 for 20. I cannot let this 20-week series go by without doing a week on date night, right? We all hear, on social media or just in anything having to do with marriage, you hear about date nights. You know, like you'll see the couple that posts a picture out with my bestie on a date night, or hanging out with my favorite lady for date night. And you could easily take date night for granted. In our marriages, we get so busy. So what's date night? What's the big deal about going on dates? I have to say that there have been dates that Tim and I have gone on that have been less than romantic, we'll say. We've pulled into the parking lot of that restaurant where we made reservations, and once we got there, we entered into a discussion that left us so angry that we sat in the parking lot. We never even really went on a date because we were having hard conversations. But dare I say that talking about the hard stuff in our marriages leads to the good stuff. Recently, I just posted a blog about overnight dates. And if you are around me longer than a week, if we've had multiple conversations, what's going to come up is the topic of overnight dates. Because after 20 years of marriage, a routine that Tim and I have built into our marriage is overnight dates. And I cannot advocate them enough, because there's something that happens when you get away for a solid 24 hours with your spouse. Over at NicoleHouse.com, I wrote a full article on it with lots of little points why I think you should think new thoughts when it comes to overnight dates. You know, it's funny, as I've talked to plenty of couples, lots of moms and lots of dads, and dads generally are on board for overnight dates. It's us moms. It's us moms that struggle, and we struggle hard with letting our little chicks, be under the care of somebody else. It's hard to allow somebody else to step in, even if it's for 24 hours, and take care of everything that we do. We have these fears that, well, what if Johnny acts up? What if my little Bodie gets lippy or breaks someone's stuff or does something and I don't get to handle it the way that I'd want to handle it? What if something happens and I'm not there? Or, you know what? They just need me. And so there's so many reasons why moms get caught up. But one thing you'll never hear is a daddy, at least I've yet to hear a dad say, I just really can't go on a date night. Usually the husband is begging, right? And whether he's communicating it out loud, his heart is longing and begging to be alone with his bride. There's just something about connection. Now, some of those things that happen on overnight dates compared to day dates. Day dates are incredible. And by day dates, I mean like going to a movie and dinner or the normal things we think of for dates. But there's something magical that happens on overnight dates. Here are a couple things, and I discussed them in my article that I wrote, but no clothes. How many times do you get to sleep naked with your spouse? It doesn't happen, right? It just, because we have teenagers milling about our house and we have little tiny kids often curling up in bed with us. So we generally have to have clothes on. But there's something about skin to skin interaction, right? I'm not even talking about sex, just being naked and alone with your spouse. It's incredible, right? The next thing is, because good sex is intentional. We all want good sex. That's why people watch porn, is because they somehow think that they will get good sex. And it's really never going to come from porn or things like that. It's going to come from an intentional investment in your spouse. You know what's crazy is somewhere along the way, we've forgotten that the Bible is so pro married sex, right? Look at Song of Songs. Song of Solomon, it blows your mind. Some of the things it talks about in there, you're like, did they just say that? But yeah, it totally just says climber fruit. Just gonna leave it there. But really, get away on a date and read that book of the Bible. It's incredible. God wants you to experience in your marriage good, satisfying, edifying sex, right? It's incredible. And the next thing happens naturally on overnight dates is communication. Now, this one could get tricky. Recently, Tim and I, well, not recently, last year for Tim and I's 20th wedding anniversary, we planned this grand, amazing trip to Hawaii for a week. We were going to go and celebrate, have, the best sex of our lives. We were going to talk about the best things that we've ever talked about. We were going to plan for our future. Everything was going to be magical. Well, I was dead in the middle of this, series that I'm teaching, 20 for 20, and things were hard. They were so freaking hard that I wanted to cancel the trip. I didn't even want to go to Hawaii, one of the most magical places on earth. I just didn't want to go because I didn't want to be alone with Tim because he was making me angry. I was annoyed by him, and we were having to deal with hard things. But we'd already paid for the trip, so we went ahead and went. And what should have been one of the best weeks turned into one of the hardest weeks. We had to have some of the hardest conversations. Days that we would go, walking around at the beach were often in silence as we sat next to each other. When we did communicate, we weren't communicating about things that were exciting. We were communicating about things that were difficult, things that are so easy in our everyday lives to just kind of brush under the carpet and not have to address because normal life allows for that, right? I could get busy doing dishes, or I could get busy with our kids. I can busy my mind so that I don't have to deal with any of the hard things that are going on in my marriage. In hindsight, when I look back at that trip, if you would ask me a week or two after the trip, I would have been like, it was a terrible trip. It was so hard. But in hindsight, it was one of the best, most life-giving trips for my marriage because we had to deal with the hard stuff to get to the good stuff. We had to deal with those things that we'd been putting off. So don't be afraid of communication, even if sometimes it's messy. The next thing that is so important with overnight dates and just dating your spouse in general really helps with is dreaming together. Do you have dreams? I'm a person who dreams, and I dream big, and so is Tim. Tim will come up with the biggest plans, and we need each other on board, right? When Tim first told me he was going to go to med school, I could tell you I was not excited about it, but we processed it. And we were forced to dream big and dream 10 and even 15 years in advance. I'm a person who dreams. This 20 for 20 thing was a dream for me. I love marriage and I wanted to impact other people's marriages, but it required me to have to process this with my husband, right? Because it was going to take our time and our energy and my emotional energy. So us really dreaming together was so important. And that doesn't happen when day-to-day life is going on. So get away and dream. There's also things that happen in your home that require, in your head, you could say, man, I just really wish the kids X, Y, and Z, or I hope for them this and I hope for them that, but we never really communicate or articulate that to our spouse. Getting away for the night allows that to happen. And lastly, remembering the important things. Your spouse is the most important thing. Your kids are passing through, and having toddlers and teenagers, I am realizing that more than ever. My son just proposed to his girlfriend. My son is moving out to marry the woman that he's chose to spend his life with. And I'm reminded, my husband, Tim, and I are the nucleus of our family. And these little tiny babies become big people that move on with their lives without us as the core. So keeping first things first, which is your marriage. Your kids are passing through. You're the nucleus. Keep the nucleus healthy because everything you do and say oozes out of that, right? You know what? Marriage is the biggest investment you'll ever make. And I can't say that enough. I know that it's hard to get away. I know that it's hard as a mom and as a dad to disconnect sometimes from life because we have little people that need us. But if I can just encourage you to do one hard thing this quarter within the next 3 months, is put on your calendar a day to just solely 24 solid hours to invest in your spouse. It may not be the dreamiest date, and you may have to talk about some of the hardest things, but I guarantee you it will move you forward if you allow it to. Friends, have an incredible week, and I look forward to coming next week with the last week in this series. Thanks for hanging out with me for the last 20 weeks. Have a great, great day.